Happy Friday, everyone. I am really excited. I am here with Allison Giddens from Wintec. And the first time I heard of Allison, she was on Hear Her Story podcast, which is the Women in Manufacturing podcast, hosted by Allison Grialis. I almost forgot her last name. Sorry, Allison Grialis. And she just had such a great personality. You are funny, you are humorous, and you are so passionate about manufacturing and what you do. So I reached out to you and you agreed to come on to Mavens. So welcome to Mavens. Can you just start off real quick with an introduction of yourself and what Wintec is and some of the things that you do at Wintec?
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited. I came across you guys in Mavens Manufacturing on LinkedIn, so I'm happy to be here. So my name is Allison Giddens, and it's funny because Allison Grialis and I often get our names are so close together that you can't call us Allison G because both of us will go, what? Who?
Yeah.
Which one? So I'm a president of operations here at Wintec, a small business manufacturer specializing in aerospace equipment and tooling here right outside of Atlanta. So it's not too far outside of Atlanta, a place called Kennesaw. So it's I've been doing this for, I guess, 15 years this August. Last October with my business partner, John Hudson, he and I purchased the business from Wintec's founder. And so now John handles the manufacturing side of things, and I handle kind of the more business-oriented and process-oriented side of things. We make a great team, and every day is an adventure.
It's interesting because when I first spoke with you, you had really a non-traditional way of into manufacturing. You started at a different career pathway and you weren't really happy. And you said you approached your neighbor who actually was the former owner of Wintec and was like, give me a job. So can you dive into that a little bit and explain how you got connected with Wintec and why you decided to stay there and eventually buy the company with your partner?
Yes. So yeah, it is kind of funny. So I graduated with an undergraduate degree in criminal justice and psychology. And so I thought I kind of wanted to go into that realm. And I had an internship with a local youth detention center. And it just broke my heart. Every day it was tough. And I realized big picture, I said, I can't emotionally do this for this kind of pay. And the people out there who do that, you are saints, beyond saints. Yeah. And so I thought, well, if I'm already this early into thinking that I don't really want to do this, then maybe I need to hurry up and make a decision on what I do want to do. So I jumped into sales and marketing for a large media corporation and enjoyed my time there. In hindsight, I had a great first boss. She really did a lot, despite, being in my early 20s and thinking I knew everything. In hindsight, she was a really good boss. And from there, I spent a couple of years there. Again, learned a lot, but didn't really feel like it was my place, the small fish in the big pond. So I contacted my family's neighbor, who I had pet sat for before, and I knew he owned a company. I said, I want to come work for you. And he said, you don't know what it is that I do. And I said, I really don't care. I want a new job. And my dad said, I can't quit my other job before I have a job. So, the rest
you got to help me out here.
Right. So he called me in for an interview, let me interview. I started from the ground up, really just filing papers and doing admin assistant kind of stuff. And then bit by bit, I learned a little bit about everything.
So what was it about Wintec that really made you passionate to want to stay with the company and eventually acquire it?
I really liked the fact that at the end of the day, I had something to show for it. And it wasn't just the paperwork side of things, but it was knowing that there were things happening on the shop floor, that an order came in from a customer and something was made from essentially nothing. And there was immediate impact. And you could argue that aerospace, yes, they're involved in national defense, and whether you're, pro-war, anti-war, whatever you think of, no matter what politics you have, there are things within the aerospace industry that matter and mean a lot to the world. I mean, if you look at like the C-130, not only was it developed for purposes of transportation of soldiers and things, but they're constantly working with, firefighters to put out fires out west. They're bringing aid to countries that need it. I mean, these are all, we're a tiny little ripple in the big picture. And it was just really cool for me to know that I was a tiny little speck of that.
Well, and I think it's a really exciting time with aerospace too now, with everything that's going on with Virgin. They just did a space flight, which is crazy. And then just all the satellite stuff that's happening. And even companies like Amazon, they're doing the drone stuff and getting things delivered by drones and everything. And a lot of people don't make those connections to aerospace, and they're all connected with each other and they're all involved. And I think just because if your components aren't directly going on to those parts that fly, there's still other components that are involved with the communications and stuff to keep them on course and things like that. So it's such a, I think, exciting time for aerospace right now. And even with the pandemic, aviation is part of aerospace. And, when flying shut down, that was such a challenge. Did Wintec have a hard time during that time, or are you not so much in that aviation space?
We are not so much in the aviation space. We've got some colleagues and some different friends of ours that are, and they were, during the pandemic, when certain things hit them hard, they were already anticipating what they were going to need to do as soon as things picked back up, because a lot of those planes were not designed to sit on the runway for a lot of time, or to sit somewhere in storage for a long time. So then you have this whole other component of maintenance requirements and safety checks and all these different things. So it was fascinating to kind of see how overnight nearly it turned into a completely different way of thinking about manufacturing.
So one of the things that you just finished up with is a summer internship program that you do on a virtual basis. And right before we went live, you were describing how you had an international student as well, and you weren't expecting that. So can you provide us some information on this summer internship program that you do, and when it started, how it got started, why it started, what are your main goals and mission for this specific program?
So we, back last March, right before the pandemic, we were supposed to take on 2 in-person interns, and it was going to be the first time that I was going to take them on and kind of work with them on a project. And I was a little bit nervous because it was going to be the first time I was doing something like this. We had taken on interns before on the shop floor, but I wanted to bring a little bit more value to their actual experience of manufacturing, because these were students who were contemplating engineering degrees, and I wanted to make sure that as engineers, they could be the best engineers that they are by knowing the manufacturing process. So anyone in manufacturing knows that you're a manufacturer and you're an engineer. You could technically be both things, but maybe not. And sometimes there's a little bit of grief that engineers might cause manufacturers and manufacturers might cause engineers. And so to know the other side is to make yourself that much better of a manufacturer or that much better of an engineer. And so COVID happened. We had to almost cancel this internship. And I got a call from a teacher that we've got a really good relationship with. And he called me, he said, I had a few other students who had their internships canceled. Can I throw them at Wintec? And I couldn't say no, but I'm thinking, I don't even know how I'm going to take the 2 that I had already committed on. Mm-hmm. And I said, yeah, but it's going to be an internship. It's going to be virtual. And I remember hearing that coming out of my mouth going, I have no idea what I'm doing right now. And I went home and I came up with a curriculum. And the curriculum, that the intent was to expose students to as much about manufacturing as I could, even if I myself could not personally provide that information. Okay. So I went through my list of contacts, and I decided, all right, who are some dynamic people that I could reach out to see if they'd be interested in giving us an hour of their time and talking about what they do day to day and why they love it. So I had met a terrific, now I think, friend over in the UK during a Women in Manufacturing trip several years ago, Ram, and he jumped on and he agreed, yeah, I'll talk about engineering design. And so he talked about that. We had Holly out with American Metalcraft out in Douglasville, Georgia. Holly Gottfredson agreed to talk about how manufacturing was important to architecture. and the manufacture of parts outside of buildings, and everything from paneling to weather resistant to the finishes. We talked to Scott Luton about supply chain and logistics, which of course was super important at that point in time because it was all about the shortage of toilet paper and such. So there were things that were real time that we could talk about. So came up with this list, and we had, gosh, I want to say 16 different people that agreed to be a part of this. And it was going to be 1 hour a day over lunch on Zoom, and with a different subject matter expert every day. And the students were told ahead of time, here's who you're going to be talking to. Look them up, get to know them a little bit online so you come prepared with questions. And then at the end of the program, we told them from the get-go, at the end of the program, you're going to present on a topic in manufacturing that you feel passionate about. So something that maybe you learned during the course of this, maybe not. Some of the students already had certain projects lined up for their senior year of high school. And so I said, I welcomed them to use them, test it out, kind of hone that in. So that way, when it counts for school, it counts for school. But the coolest part was all these subject matter experts that jumped on for the hour to give us their time, they came back to judge presentations.
That's fun. I like
so
that.
It was so fun because the students had already kind of gotten to know them, and now they got practice presenting in front of professionals. And there were so many cool connections made because there was actually a student that presented on something that one of the judges honed in on and contacted that student and is now working with that student to make that thing come alive. And those are all things, like none of that was required. None of that was, expected, but it was a phenomenal first run for sure.
So are these then just high school students, or are you taking some college students in as well, or is it just specifically made for kids that are not in college yet?
The intent was rising juniors and rising seniors in high school.
Okay.
I kind of felt like once they were that first part in college, I almost felt as though I didn't want to talk down to them, and at the same time, I didn't want to talk too far above the high school kids. And I didn't know what kind of delicate balance I was looking at. I'm not a teacher, and so I kind of was winging it as I was going anyways. I could see definite potential for a college version of this, especially because it is all about networking and it is all about being exposed to these professionals.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the main challenges, whether you're a student in high school or a student in college. I never had this where, after we graduated or whatever, they didn't really teach us the basics of interviewing. I got those tips from my dad, who was involved with manufacturing his entire life. And he's like, okay, look, first impressions, prepare some questions for them, know what their company does, feel it out, make sure it's a good fit for you. If it's not, then don't apply there, because then you're going to get yourself involved in a company you're not going to be happy at, and it's going to be miserable. And even my daughter, like when she went to go apply for the restaurant that she works at now, she was so nervous because she's like, I don't know how to communicate with other people outside of my circle. And I'm like, okay, so I tried my best to give her tips, and she did another interview just recently and she nailed the job that day. So it's awesome. Nice. But even college students, I was talking to Lale Lavelle from Colorado. She's part of the Colorado chapter of WIM, and she said the same thing. She's like, some of these engineering students that I work with, they just get so stressed out. And she started talking about like their mental health and stuff. And she's like, it's really important for mentors to kind of guide them and provide them that guidance so that they know it's okay if you do fail or make a mistake. It's not the end of the world, and just keep learning as you go. So I think what you're doing is absolutely fantastic. It's great that you were able to continue it during the pandemic, because that was such a hard time for all of us. Can you talk about this year's group of students? Because I knew you just finished up the program, and maybe provide one of the projects or presentations that a student gave, like your favorite one.
Yes. So last year we had 12 students, and they were all from Georgia. They were from, I think, 4 different high schools in Georgia. And then this year I advertised it, opened it up, and sent my regular emails to my contacts. And the next thing I knew, I was getting requests from California and Texas and Kansas and Dubai. And so we invited them all. We welcomed them, and we took on 16 students, and it was fantastic. This group it was interesting to see the wide variety of interests. So we polled them ahead of time to ask, what is it about manufacturing, or really any kind of STEM side of things where you could overlap it and justify to be in sort of a manufacturing program. And there were a lot of engineers, a lot of interest in the cybersecurity as it relates to the industry. So we did have a cybersecurity panel on the talk, and all that was really cool. The presentations, just like last year, blew me out of the water at some of these topics. There were topics on water filtration systems, how to bring clean drinking water to communities that need it. And this student had developed a system for how to do it using solar panels, with solar panels and condensation. And again, these students are far smarter than I am, so I can't really rehash this. There was another student that talked about the use of AI in sporting events to help referees get it right. Another talked about using non-recyclable plastics as an aggregate in cement. It's so fascinating. I mean, it was obvious when students presented that they were presenting on something they really did feel passionate about. I've noticed with this generation, they're really big into sustainability. They're very into the impact that they're making today, how it's going to matter tomorrow. And so it's really kind of cool to see how they're putting pieces of the puzzle together. I think a lot better and a lot sooner than I ever did.
So after the presentations are said and done, you mentioned that the speakers that you involve in the curriculum, they judge all of the presentations. Is there some incentive that they're getting, or is it just something like, hey, this is your feedback, and then, there is the incentive of making all these wonderful connections and building their network that way, but is there another type of incentive that they get really excited about?
So they don't necessarily know it because we don't ever promise anything ahead of time, but they do get an award, a crystal award with it. And they also get a gift card. So a couple of our speakers were gracious enough to provide gift cards as a donation. So Terry from Southwire, another Women in Manufacturing member, Stacy with Cord Marketing here in Atlanta. She presents with Terry on like a sales marketing presentation in manufacturing. So she was gracious enough to donate. So we just kind of do, $50 or $100 gift cards, and then this pretty crystal award. And the intent there is not to, say, hey, look, this student's better than any of the other 16. The intent is, okay, now not only do you have the completion of this program to put on your resume, but now you have something else to put on your resume under awards and honors to be able to prompt conversation, to be able, you want your resume to stick out to somebody. So if there's a stack of resumes sitting there and somebody pulls yours and you're the next one and they're looking at this going, a non-recyclable cement or non-recyclable plastic as a cement aggregate winner presentation. What is that? I got to call and ask about this.
That's awesome. I wouldn't even how do you come up with stuff like that? I feel like my IQ just dropped a little bit hearing that idea, because I would have never thought of anything like that. That is amazing. So what are your plans for next year's program then? Are you going to try to make it bigger, or do you already have your guests in line? What are some of the things you're looking forward to?
It's challenging because it does take a lot of work. It's a solid almost 2 hours out of every day for 4 weeks, on top of all the planning ahead of time and the prep work and all of that. But I'm in that delicate balance where, and if any of them are watching this or go back to watch this, they'll probably laugh at me when I say this, but I don't want to burn out my volunteers. And, there are some fantastic, gracious people that have offered to do this last year and then this year. We did a version of this in January with a group of neurodiverse young men.
Okay.
And so it was young men along the spectrum who identified as neurodiverse, and they were the nicest, coolest kids. I say kids because they were younger than me, but but they did a version of this program. I partnered with Meaghan Ziemba of Parallel, and it's her mission with her company to bring these types of opportunities like manufacturing and different job place opportunities to populations that typically would be overlooked for this. So we wanted to expose manufacturing to neurodiverse to show them, hey, look, here's an industry you might not have thought of. And they flourished. They loved it. And they had presentations that were fantastic. And they were really engaged. Speakers were fantastic. But back to your question about what does the future look like, the fact that I've had multiple repeat volunteers from summer 2020, January 2021, summer 2021, I almost feel as though I don't want to outstay my welcome, but at the same time, they are passionate about educating the next generation too. So I think as it pertains to just the general manufacturing version of the AMVI, the AVI, is to possibly keep a smallish group, maybe 10 to 15 students in the summer, and maybe start looking at different pieces of manufacturing, maybe start reaching out to different volunteers. I mean, if anybody's hearing this and is interested in volunteering their time, or heck, if they hear this and they want to pick up this program and run with it themselves, I will be more than happy to give you the tools to make that happen. But the fine print is that you have to do it for high school students. And you actually, if you ask me the question to get you the info, you actually have to do it. So
that's awesome. And I think it's exciting that you had an international student, because as I mentioned before, I've had experience with international students who come to America and they're a little bit timid right away because they haven't been exposed either to the culture, they don't know anyone. And it's programs like yours that really get them involved with that. And then they meet people, they make those connections so that if they do decide to come to the United States and either work in manufacturing or engineering, they already have those connections and they can be a little less timid when they get over here and start jumping into things. So I think that is amazing. And I think it's a great segue into our next conversation that I wanted to have with you about workforce development. So there's a skills gap that's going on in manufacturing that everyone knows about. And one of my missions is to not only help close that skills gap, but also the gender gap and get more women involved. And I've had a lot of conversations about how we need to change the way we're talking about things and showing things to not just students, but to parents as well. But I think it needs to be on a higher level too, where you need to actually get the entire community involved, which takes a village, right? Because I mean, I have 3 kids. Yeah, I do most of the stuff, but my family is a big part of helping me raise my kids. And it's been like that for years. And I think it applies on a bigger level too in communities, especially communities that might not be on the higher end of the economic level, you know? So I wanted to get some of your thoughts on what you think needs to change in terms of, you know, getting that next generation of work development for manufacturing and engineering.
Yeah, so I think that's the $1 million question for sure. So a couple of months ago, I guess it was a few months ago at this point, my business partner and I decided we were going to call all of our competitors and get everybody in the same room and talk workforce development. Because in our view, we have, you know, you've got in terms of our area of maybe 15 different manufacturers in the kind of direct competitors. And I kind of use that term loosely just because we each kind of have a niche. But if we've got workforce development and we're all pulling from a pie that's this big of workers, then the pie is this big, and 10% of that pie is pretty little. But if we all worked together and got that pie bigger, then the 10% becomes a bigger piece. So my argument was, if we can all work together as competitors who are going after the same people to work here, work at our facilities, then if we get more people, then everybody wins. So reached out to a bunch of the competitors. They overall got great response. Everybody was game to, yeah, let's do this. You're right. Okay, let's go. And that was a little challenging because then it just kind of fizzled out, and it was tough to get people's commitment to do something. And I think that's Meaghan Ziemba, my parallel friend who was in the January AMVI. One of her colleagues put it best when they said, everybody wants to go to dinner and nobody wants to make the meal. And that's essentially what it looks like. So in speaking with a friend of mine who works for the local county school system, I asked her, I said, what are you seeing that certain industries are doing well? Because that's what we need to mimic. That's what we need to copy. And she said, construction. Construction is doing a really good job in our area of being involved in schools and being in the face of kids. She said, there's this misconception that if you come to a career day, you can check the box and, all right, we're good. Kids are going to be in manufacturing now. No, that's not how this works. You have to be in their face all of the time. You have to get your brand out there. You have to get your face out there. You have to be known as somebody who's going to show up. And that's really tough for manufacturers because we're busy. Mm-hmm. It's not a priority because, first off, there's no quick return on investment. And secondly, it's not a priority right now that's going to supersede a fire I have to put out yesterday. So I think that it's a matter of discipline. It's a matter of patience and those things that manufacturers, we just typically aren't really known for being good at. But if we can do a better job of being in the faces of these middle schools and high schools, we've got to start younger. We at least in our area in Metro Atlanta, we did kids a horrible disservice by pulling out vocational technology, different schools, shop, home ec, all that stuff that everybody decided, pull this out, everybody's got to go to college. We need to stop having the conversation that tech school is as a runner up for college. That is bogus. We don't want tech school manufacturers. We don't want dumb people. So we want the best of the best. That your smarts and ability have nothing to do whether or not you go to college. It has everything to do with what is it that you want to do? Do you want to work with your hands? Do you want to make something from nothing? There's a lot of opportunities here.
I completely agree with you because we had tech and home ec. I know my daughter has home ec in her school right now, and they're really trying hard to bring those trades back into their school budget. And I actually just talked to her principal of the high school because last year they weren't able to do it. They weren't able to do a career day. But I'm working with another podcaster, Tony Gunn, on a national school tour. And what I want to do is actually get schools involved, get tech schools involved, get manufacturers involved. So they really want to bring back the career day to their school. So I'm in the works with this high school in my local community to really flare up their career day. So not just have people at the tables and stuff. I want them to put on product demonstrations. I want them to bring their most charismatic people there. And one of the things that the company that I work for now, PhotoFab, one of the things that we're doing now is we're working with an agency that connects manufacturers to schools all over the nation. And it's free for us unless they decide to do an internship and it's a paid internship. And that's where we would need to think about doing a paid one. But we're going to actually create a marketing strategy around whatever project we decide to do, and whatever students we get, if they're part of the coursework or the internship, we're going to create our marketing strategy around that experience. And I think that's one of the ways that manufacturers can actually get in front of their community is make it part of their marketing strategy. Just, because we all need case studies, right, of what we're making and what we're creating. And one of the biggest challenges are NDAs, because if you work with companies in defense or aerospace, they don't want to sell their secret sauce. And it's just a really big hurdle for manufacturers to jump over in terms of case studies. So we're going to actually do this but make it a case study so that we can show what we're making and we don't necessarily have to tie it with a company.
That's a cool idea.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with all of that. And for Mavens, my goal is to highlight women specifically because I really want to get younger generations of women involved in manufacturing. And I just wanted to, before we close up here, get your thought process and how to get more girls into manufacturing, because as much as I like getting younger generations into manufacturing, my daughter is the prime example that I've been using. None of her friends are talking about it. They're all going into healthcare. They're going into psychology. They're doing other things outside of manufacturing and engineering. So what are some of your thoughts on how we can get women excited about the sectors and actually come into the sector and stay?
I think it's a matter of you can't be what you can't see. And I think that there are so many opportunities out there for both young men and young women between healthcare and any of those sorts of jobs that are always in our faces. I mean, you see, CSI or Grey's Anatomy. You got all these TV shows where it's glamorous, right? You got all these jobs that, and my best friend's a nurse. She'll tell you that her job's not glamorous, but she was a big Grey's Anatomy fan. So there's certain things that impact somebody either subconsciously or not so sub. And I think we in manufacturing need to your point, need to do a better job of marketing ourselves. And I think it's a slow boat, a really big ship that we're turning. So we're not going to see a change overnight, and it's going to be tempting to stop doing what we're doing. But we just need to stay the course, and people like you keep doing what you're doing. And I think that if you are, we were talking about family members who don't necessarily have kids. If that family member is involved in an industry, I would hope that they become kind of a lighthouse for other family members, maybe those kids, whether it's nieces, nephews, and otherwise, that they can say, oh, well, my uncle or my aunt is in manufacturing. I'm going to go talk to them. So I think it's important for all of us to kind of be a role model in that regard.
I agree. And that's really hilarious that you brought up Grey's Anatomy, because my daughter wants to be a trauma nurse. And one of her favorite shows is Grey's Anatomy. So I was like, wait a minute. Now I'm connecting the dots. I get it. So we just need to make like a TV show of manufacturers.
Exactly. And I think there is something out there, and it might just be an online thing now, but where it's competition style, like in manufacturing. And so they're so close. The UK has they're working hard on their manufacturing marketing. Mm-hmm. They have a Made in UK, Manufacturing UK channel. Nick Peters, if you want to look him up, he's awesome. They do some really cool stuff and they're trying. We need to start doing what they're doing with the passion that they're doing it.
Earlier you said too how you reached out to your competitors to brainstorm, okay, how can we make this circle bigger? And I think that's such an important thing to look at. Like, let's start working together. We can still compete with each other. That's just how the supply chain works. But let's, work together in this area so that more eyes are looking at us, and then we can make it a competition about who has the best workers.
Right. Yeah, no, and it is, yes, it's a competition for employees, but we all have our niche already. So it's not as though we're at each other's throats about things, or, right. There's plenty of work to go around.
Absolutely.
And that's part of the frustration, is we got to find people who want to work.
Yeah. And especially now with, the supply chain shortages and everything, we need to start building ourselves up again as U.S. manufacturing and be that powerhouse that we can be. So I think this was such a great conversation, Allison. Thank you so much. Before I let you go to enjoy your Friday, is there anything that you were hoping I would ask and I just didn't get around to it? And if not, is there anything else you would like to say before I let you go?
No, just thank you so much for having me, and thank you for highlighting people and keeping these kind of conversations going.
Well, thank you for coming onto the show. So anyone that's interested in learning more about Wintec, their website is wintec.net. It's at the bottom of the screen. Be sure to check out their website, because one of the favorite things that I like is you actually animated the life journey of a part, and I didn't catch it right away. And when I caught it this morning, I was so incredibly happy. It was just so cute. So be sure to check out their website. There is a comment from Gwen Bradley. She said, great conversation, ladies. Thank you, Gwen, for joining us again today. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend and see you next week with Michelle. Bye, guys.
Bye. Have a great weekend.
This episode of Mavens in Manufacturing has been sponsored by Z Ink Solutions. Z Ink Solutions. This isn't your grandmother's copywriting service. We provide copywriting and copy editing services that provide impactful text and memorable storytelling for a variety of brands and industries. Contact us today at zinkSolutions.com. That's z-inksolutions.com.